This is precisely what you should do during a system design interview, is to ask as many questions as you can. If you really want to impress the interviewer, go ahead and pick something else. Like, I'm so tired of seeing REST. Like 99 times out of 100, it's always just REST CRUD APIs. Go ahead and pick, let's look at the data choice. Oh, look at this. We have NoSQL, my favorite database.
They must not have watched your videos.
Yeah, that's an instant disrespect, right? I have made the video and I talked about it so many times. It is just classic, right? It gets repeated so many times, but unfortunately, you guys know how I'm gonna react. Oh, okay, but he picked the SQLDB, but not NoSQL. Okay, so all right, that's interesting. Done. Have you ever had a
Ooh,
candidate just being done in the interview before the time is up?
negative points.
Welcome back, Easy Climb Nation, to another system design battle. Every Wednesday on our Discord, we have these battles. Basically, we have two contestants volunteer to go head to head designing a system in 45 minutes. At the end of the 45 minutes, the contestants have 15 minutes to explain their designs, and our panel of judges decide whose design was better. This week, our contestants were asked to design a hotel reservation system. The functional requirements this week were: 1, users should be able to browse all the hotels in the world; 2, users should be able to book a selected room in any hotel that they pick; 3, the system should handle payments and ensure that the rooms are properly assigned, no double booking. So we threw some crazy numbers at the candidates this week as well. Basically, we had them support 23 million hotels, 250 million daily active users, and also we said that there will be spikes in traffic during end of year holiday seasons. So there were a couple tricky elements to this one, namely the fact that they had to deal with global distribution of hotels and competition for the available rooms, hot locations and how to deal with spikes in interest, fetching and managing hotel availability systems. So we had a lot of fun in this one, and I think we all learned a lot as well. If you'd like to attend these sessions live, join the Discord in the description. Enjoy.
You guys go ahead and introduce yourselves as well.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Brooklyn Nets. Hello. I'm a software engineer with 2 years of experience.
Nice. Welcome in. And
Nice. I'm Toronto Raptors. I'm a platform engineer. I have 3 years of experience and currently work at Wayfair.
all right, amazing, guys. Does that kind of make sense to you guys so far? Any questions?
So far, so good. Could you elaborate what does 1/5 availability mean again?
Yes. So 1/5 availability is the number of hotel rooms. So this refers to the number of rooms. So you're going to have hotels, and you can also have like Airbnb style, like apartments for short-term rentals, I guess. So essentially, you're only going to have 1/5 of availability. Essentially, what that implies is that you're going to have much higher chance of competition for the same property.
Yeah, so it's 80% booked.
Yes, yeah, pretty much 80% booked.
So we can browse all the hotels in the world. So we can assume that we're getting this information from like an API, or are hotels able to create their own like entries and like create their own rooms and like say there's a hotel here and this doesn't have many rooms, or we assume we already have that information.
Correct. So all hotels are visited, like already present in the system.
Okay.
So they're all supplied. You can assume that you have all the information from all the hotels.
What are other non-functional requirements except for consistency, right? And preventing double booking and that spike in availability that we have to handle.
Um, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, all other non-functional requirements?
Yes.
Hmm. I would say I'll let you guys think about that. So there's a little bit of a surprise. I guess I don't want to spoil it, but there are some challenges other than the most obvious one, which is handling conflict resolution. At the end of the day, you're maintaining a system with 250 million daily active users with a global distribution. So whoever can think about any other areas that are pretty challenging for a system like this to operate will definitely get some brownie points. All right, great questions. Really nice deep dive. This is precisely what you should do during a system design interview, is to ask as many questions as you can. I have definitely seen when people were really, really, really good at design, but unfortunately, we still had to fail them because they didn't ask any questions in the beginning. That's like an automatic fail. It is just like going in your driver's test and not putting your seatbelt on. Pretty much the same thing. Well, anyways, any other questions before we get started?
I think I'm good.
Awesome.
The interesting thing, I was wondering which direction you were going to take it on the room booking, if you were going to book types of rooms versus individual rooms. I feel like the individual rooms Ticketmaster problem is a lot simpler than the type of rooms hotel
Exactly.
problem.
Right? That's the secret sauce of this problem. So for those who don't know, so this is the problem that is actually very challenging and is very common among all companies. Every single company that has like an important thing that it can get screwed up pretty much faces the same problem. Like assigning only one driver to the ride. Imagine your Uber, right? This is the problem you have. Any company that has any real-time transactions for with a limited resources would have this type of problem, and as well as your favorite food delivery service. So this one is actually extremely hard. Most of the people, mid-level engineers would instantly go for strong consistency. And I think the answer is actually not that simple because consistency is actually really expensive. Like maintaining a system that has strong consistency is much harder than maintaining a system that is not strongly consistent. In reality, the trade-offs are much more serious than an interview, of course, but I believe that we really should be focusing on making sure that we come up with a more sophisticated solution rather than just saying, oh no, we just need strong consistency and that's how we're going to handle the double booking problem, because that's not how it's just going to work.
So another really interesting aspect about this one is, I think actually more or less how do you handle popular events with the location in mind? So say events like the Super Bowl,
Oh
or
yes.
I was in San Francisco over Lunar New Year. Do you have any idea it was to find out how hard it was to find a hotel last second?
Yes, absolutely. That actually is a very good point. I guess, what do you think is the root cause of the problem? The lack of availability or the technical limitation of the system working reliably in that type of setting?
I mean, it's definitely reliability with it, just because if you do give a like if you do give a false positive, so like a confirmation that something is booked, but there is a room that's double booked,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do in that situation? You can't easily, if you're the hotel, you can't easily add another room, and especially when you start to get to more luxury tiers with it, you have users that are potentially pissed and from out of town. You really, from a brand perspective, you really can't afford to screw up.
Very
I
interesting.
think another challenge on the user experience side is just say you've got, just a couple rooms left in your hotel. You've got to you have to decide, you're designing the system, you give people the 10-minute countdown to check out and block it during that
Mm-hmm.
time, or do you make it a free for all
Oh, that's a
and
good point.
everyone gets all the way through like generally you would think you'd go for the first one, give people a
I think it's
time
best
countdown.
practice to add a lock.
Yeah, but if you've got limited stock and then people abandon, you're it's gonna take a bit for someone to be able to get through and actually book it. But I guess thinking out loud here, if you've got limited stock, people are gonna feel what's the thing? Sunk cost fallacy or something that they're gonna like go through with
I
the
see.
booking.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Basically saying like there is like 50 people booking this right now, or 25 people viewed in the last hour, something like this. That is actually very
Oh
interesting.
yeah, that's a great idea. Like LeetCode just added the number of people active on this problem,
That
like
is
WebSocket counter thing.
that's
Put
very
that on your
interesting.
hotel and you'd increase your conversion rate.
Really interesting. All right, let's review the designs. I think we were been chatting for a bit, and yeah, maybe everybody in chat can also share some of their ideas on what you guys think is the most difficult part for you about this problem. It would be pretty cool to hear what you guys think. All right, so we're gonna go over Brooklyn Nets first. So we've got some APIs, pretty classic choice of just going for REST CRUD APIs. As I mentioned in the video, that we posted today, if you really want to impress the interviewer, go ahead and pick something else. Like, I'm so tired of seeing REST. Like 99 times out of 100, it's always just REST CRUD APIs. Go ahead and pick gRPC, just to be different. I feel like just standing out at least somewhat from others is already good. So we've got some hotels, and then you pass the country, city, and rating. So I'm not a fan of this, to passing country and city, just because like I don't really think it scales, or like it's in terms of like, what if I want to add like maybe now, maybe for example Tokyo has so many sub areas in the city, right? Um, how would that scale? Am I supposed to pass the entire Tokyo? It's pretty huge. Like I really want to specify, narrow down the search. Much better strategy would be.
Yeah, I feel like for that one, you want to do lat long, but you could have a separate API endpoint and service that, because the customer's going to enter a city,
Mm-hmm.
you can get lookup of the epicenter of that city, and then your
Yep.
actual search is always based on
Precisely.
Latlon.
So that's called point of interest data. And Google Maps have fantastic APIs for those. And also there's another company, that does that. I mean, there are a lot of services that do that, but definitely you would want to pass the starting point, lat long or geohash ID, and then the mile radius to your search, and then return list of hotels. Interesting. So get rooms and get booking. So again, like that's kind of what I don't like about REST APIs, right? Because like, how much value do they really bring to the interview? I would argue not a lot, but I guess that's fair. And if you really want to go ahead and write APIs, I guess maybe focus on the most important ones. I would say the biggest API that's missing. Oh, hold on. There is this post API that's booking. All right, never mind. So it's taking hotel
Yeah, but
ID.
even that one, it's kind of like
Yeah.
some type of a user journey saga pattern, something where you're gonna initiate a booking, and then you need a completion that confirms it
Interesting.
with payment.
Yeah. Let's look at the data choice. Oh, look at this. We have NoSQL, my favorite database.
They must not have watched your videos.
Yeah, that's an instant disrespect, right? I have made the video and I talked about it so many times. It is just classic, right? It gets repeated so many times, but unfortunately, you guys know how I'm gonna react. Oh, okay, but he picked the SQL DB, but not NoSQL. So for those who are new, what's wrong with NoSQL?
So
So
booking DB, that's the highest contention thing.
yeah,
Why would you use a NoSQL something for
yeah,
less contention and SQL for higher
yeah.
contention?
So let me answer in the chat real quick. So for those who are new, what's wrong with NoSQL? So the problem is that there is at least 350,000 NoSQL databases, and all of them are doing something that is very different from each other. I think there are so many choices. Like, is this Neptune GraphDB? Is this DynamoDB? Is this Cassandra? It has very different purposes from one another.
I mean, you could even throw Redis in there too as a technicality.
Or even like if you literally take NoSQL, you can even say anything that is not a SQL, right? Maybe it can also be S3. How about that?
Elasticsearch.
It's a filing cabinet, like it's a fax machine that prints off into a pile of paper.
Yeah, or like levels.fyi used Google Sheets, right?
So the one thing on this NoSQL here, it's got rooms as a list that's included in the parent
Yeah,
object. I feel like that
Interesting.
can potentially get some scalability issues.
Yeah, I mean, NoSQL, you don't have joins. Everything is wide column store, I guess. I don't know. I feel like modeling
Yeah,
data.
if you're using, like, you can do a partition key query and a sort key, either like a prefix match or something.
Mhm.
Reading across multiple objects get you a list.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it.
Hot take. Hot take. This particular problem is going to be very reliant on the database, but overall, most of the time, it doesn't. You should just really pick basically consistency or availability with it to just go through cap, and like that's pretty much it. Stripe runs entirely on MongoDB. Is it the best choice of database? You could argue probably all day no, but like, does it work? And it does 1% of the world's GDP flow through it annually? Yes.
Fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, every single system that exists, it actually never looks like a system design interview, because like every single system that exists also has so much technical debt. You know, whenever you
There's
build.
the quote that's been making its way around LinkedIn that I think it's called the Gall effect. It's every successful large system started out as a small system. Like you don't really have large systems that were designed as large
Yeah,
systems to start with.
yeah. Well, except Easy Clam Tech. I designed it with the infinite scalability in mind.
So let's dive in on that Kafka queue real fast.
Oh yes, that's
Because I
actually.
assume this should be synchronous.
Yeah. Queue for in-demand booking items. Yeah, that's where I think I'm losing a little bit of points. Yeah, here.
I feel like it's tossed in. I think this should be synchronous flow.
Mm-hmm. And also, um, I would definitely be much more happier if this was a synchronous, of course. And I don't really see a way how Kafka can really handle this. Like, I mean, in a way that it's not. It's probably. Mm, I mean, I definitely see the point, but I don't think. I don't think. I mean, if you know me well enough, you know that I actually would go for temporal here, of course, right? Because you're gonna have a distributed workflow, and the workflow is going to be handling many steps, and reserving the slot is step one, collecting payment step two, creating an entry in DB step three, and then returning, success message to the user would be step four. So of course, temporal probably would be the best solution here. I mean, not the best, but like that's what I would do. And temporal obviously would have no problem, no need for scaling in demands. You can create an activity and monitor how long it would take. You have the temporal cloud that processes all the requests, and you can see how far along every single person is, and then you can pretty much solve all the problems in this box using temporal. What do you think about something
Yeah,
like that?
this Kafka queue here, if we go down that assumption, I feel like that's got to include like the final payment and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like a one-shot reservation versus a user journey claim and then pay.
Mm-hmm.
So at the very least, we're going to need some way that the UI, or some way that they can let it know that your reservation was successful. I would assume you'd want that on the web app versus just getting it, only finding out about it via an email later.
Mm-hmm. And for this design, what do you think? I don't think we touched this design quite as much. So this design has a lot more. Okay, so uh, that's interesting. Done. Have you ever had a
Ooh,
candidate just being done in the interview before the time is up?
negative points.
That happened to me really often, but that's always bad. If you're
I feel
done,
like the depth here on the data flow is not
yeah,
that much.
and you have, yeah. This is like I made a video for this. The video is 5 minutes long, and I talked about this exact problem. Like, every single time when there's a system design interview, there's always just CRUD. API, service, database. Always the same thing. And I feel like just adding just a little bit of more things already makes the design so much better. All right, are you guys both back?
Hello?
Hey, welcome back, Brooklyn Nuts.
Hi.
All right, everybody, round of applause for both participants for being so brave and doing this in front of potentially tens of thousands of people who are going to see this on YouTube. So feel free to drop either clapping hands or hi YouTube in chat, and then we can start with the design. All right, Toronto Raptors, would you want to go first?
Sure. Okay, so considering, I mean, I've outlined the main services that I believe are important. First is search. We want to be able to search for hotels, and there could be many parameters like whatever you want to search on. So I thought it would be a good idea to search to back it up with an Elasticsearch to fetch from the hotels database so that we could index on some of the more popular um, like queries, and then like location, price, or whatever. And then we could also back that up by Redis that can cache certain popular searches and hotel informations in the region. And we're also going to need a hotel service. The hotel service is the service that fetches hotel information and details for a certain hotel. I initially thought it would be a good idea to store hotels in a NoSQL DB, but I don't think it is the best idea because one of the requirements was to have, hotels is mainly for reading, like where it's not really a write heavy DB. It's a read heavy DB. So I kind of realized that a bit later than I should have. So hotels store really the information for the hotel and then the information for the rooms that are available there. And then the pricing. And then the static content, we can load that into S3 buckets, and then we can fetch that based on the hotel ID from the bucket. And then that bucket, those images can be actually fetched directly from CDN, which there's no good way to connect them because they're too far apart on a diagram, but we can fetch them directly from the CDN. And then booking services, that's where we, create bookings, modify bookings, delete the bookings. I understand one of the bigger requirements was to prevent double bookings. So I thought it would be a good idea to introduce some distributed locking. It doesn't really look distributed on the diagram, but there could be multiple booking SQL database shards due to the scale. So I thought a Redis lock would be a good idea. So whenever a request is made, we would lock the room ID, and then once the transaction is completed, we would release the lock. And Redis would be able to handle, the distributed part of that. And the payments, obviously, very simple here. We just make the call to Stripe, and then they handle the stuff. And then with regards to kind of scaling this whole thing, I thought it would be a good idea to store this whole thing in Kubernetes, and then these services in, I don't know, nodes or pods, whatever makes more sense, depending on the scale. And then I feel like everything except for the bookings DB should be in part of the data center. The bookings DB might be outside of the data center because we want to have global availability, and then that would also help with locks. But at some point, there would be scalability issues. So that's something to consider. But I believe based on the number of hotels, 23 million hotels, to 50 million users, that should be okay with some sharding. So, and then we can have these data center shards scaled based on the region, like North America, Europe, and then we can have multiple of these data centers within each region if we wish to do so.
We can definitely feel like you have more infra experience than average. Pretty interesting.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah. Okay. So what was the DB choice? Wait, I think this was NoSQL a couple of minutes ago. Did you change it to SQL?
You mean the hotels?
Yeah.
Yes, I did change it to SQL. I initially wanted to be a NoSQL, but then I realized that it is a read-heavy database, so SQL makes more sense. Also, the schema is very consistent, so I realized that the only reason I went with NoSQL at the beginning is I thought, well, I might as well store images with all the other data. But then I'm trading off a bunch of other important stuff just for the sake of storing images. So I can store the images in the S3 bucket based on the hotel ID. Um, yeah,
Okay.
I think SQL DB like Postgres would make sense here.
Mm-hmm. And how would you handle contention in terms of double booking and stuff like that, and a lot of transactions at the same time?
Yes, for the bookings, I would try to use Redis. So the Redis would lock the room ID during the booking process. So when the user initiates a booking, the system would get a lock on the room ID, and then once the booking is completed or not completed, then the user cancels the process, then the lock is released on the room.
I see. And even if you have this infrastructure, do you believe the load you're processing would be still handled fine by SQL?
Um, I haven't made any back of the envelope calculations, to be honest. As far as I know, Postgres with sharding can handle a lot of users.
And what
So
what
yeah,
type of sharding, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that? What exactly are
um,
you sharding on?
probably based on the booking. Sorry, on the room ID. Um, either on the room ID or the user ID. That's what I would shard based on.
All right, let's move on to Brooklyn Nets. Take it away.
Cool. Yeah, so in my design, I think it's a little bit different than how usually they operate, but the entities I had in my design were a hotel, a room type, booking, and user. And I outlined some APIs that will do the functional requirements of getting the hotels and allowing users to filter for them, booking a room, and pa handling payments so that there's no double bookings. So first, for the hotels and rooms, I store it here in a Postgres database. I went for Postgres because similarly to what Toronto Raptors said, this is going to be a more read-heavy system, and I think Postgres is a very good choice for that. And also, the data and the way I modeled out the models is pretty relational, with the room type having a certain hotel foreign key, and then also each room having a foreign key of the room type ID and hotel ID. Um, since it was relational, it made sense to use a Postgres relational database. So for the users being able to search for all the hotels in the world, we use the hotel service. And I use Elasticsearch up here that can search for hotels using a mapping of their name, city, country, and rating, address. And then also, because this is a very read heavy system, which is like there's 23 million hotels and 250 million daily active users, we want to be able to make very fast reads. So I cache the most popular hotels that have a very high rating, get a lot of bookings, and are near like hotspot locations like stadiums or like festival grounds, things like that. Cache them in here so when people look for them, we can return them very quickly. And then also, I forgot to mention for the database, I said that it's possible to use a master and follower replica model. So maybe when rooms need to be, or any of these models need to be updated, we can just use we make only writes to one master and then they get propagated to all the followers, but then we could just read from the followers and get a lot faster reads that way. So that's for the first functional requirement. And then for booking rooms, the way that the flow goes is one, we have a queue here for when it's an in-demand booking times like at Christmas, Thanksgiving, holidays, etc. And when a user hits the reservation service, what we do is we look at whatever on the request date, the user passes a hotel ID, a room type, and the dates they want to stay from. And what we do is we query for the type of room that they want, which is this model right here, and we see how many vacancies there are. And then we also look for all of the available rooms that have that room type ID and are in that hotel. And we look to see, I was imagining we do some sort of range query, and also seeing that they're not reserved yet. So I was thinking we could do some sort of range query on the bookings database to see what rooms are available. I was trying to think of doing this in that could be a very expensive computation, but I couldn't find a different way of doing it any other way. So looking for the rooms that are available through that way. And then when we find an available room, we put it in this Redis distributed lock, mapping the room ID to the user ID so that while the user is checking out and like making this booking, there could be a time to live of 10 minutes um, before the booking expires or before the room is let go of and the user doesn't have the ownership to book the room anymore. And then once they complete their booking, it'll go into our bookings database here. I went for DynamoDB because for obviously creating bookings and like maybe on like high traffic times like the holidays, there's going to be a lot of writes. So I want to use something that would optimize for high throughput. So I use DynamoDB, a non-relational database, and created the booking model with these fields on it. And PayPal handles the payments, and then pricing service could handle dynamic pricing of rooms. This is very small because I did this at the end. And then the one last thing that I didn't draw here, but I kind of realized when I was looking at Toronto Raptors, uh, Toronto Raptors design is I also had an is reserved field on my room, and I completely didn't think of how it would work. But the way that I now imagine it is when we query for looking for rooms that are available, we would also check this is reserved pool. And I think I would like to have like a cron job, maybe connected to this bookings database that would run maybe once a day and say, is the book, or for each booking, is there a booking that has a from or an end date that's not today, like in the future? Is this room currently available or not? And then we can update that for every room in the hotel database. That's kind of how I was imagining this reserved Boolean to be used, but then I didn't draw it. So I wanted to articulate it now because looking at the Toronto Raptors, it made me just realize that I didn't do that. Um, so yeah, so that's my system and how it works.
Yeah, fantastic. I think the chat was actually pretty excited about the system and said it looks pretty good. Yeah, people dropping fire.
Nice.
Great job. We can go over the feedback now. Now that you guys concluded the presentation, I guess I can go first. I 100% would love to see. I think both designs are really great. Both designs actually didn't focus too much on some of the critical components that I would love to hear more about. Something number one is geo sharding. I don't think both of you guys mentioned too much about specifically scaling and partitioning data per region, which is a very common strategy for handling real world applications. Making sure that, for example, something like Uber, for example, stores all trips in New York in a specific cluster, specific partitions of a database, right? So all New York related data stored in one place, and for hotels, it's pretty much good practice to try and do the same. The other thing that I think I was really unhappy with both designs is the reservation data entity. The most common approach would be to create a separate table that would have specific separate reservation ID and then timestamp of those two, and then you can make a query to fetch availability rather than coupling that tightly with a room table, right like here, or in that case, I believe it was also tightly coupled with a room table. I'm a big fan of having tons of tables, but they're all highly decoupled from each other and loosely tied with the one ID. Third thing, I would say a lot of those things do not need to be processed in a transactional way. I sadly we didn't see any CDC in the system at all. Actually, I don't think we ever seen a CDC in a system design battle, which makes me feel CDCs need to have more attention in just in general. CDC allow you to process change feed after something has been written to the database. And that makes it super nice for scaling system and processing data and letting other services and teams know about this. So for example, you can have a booking table that creates a new booking information, and then you can have the CDC to sync with Elasticsearch, or maybe put it in Kafka, and then other consumers can read this data and make the other tables more efficient. I think would be pretty cool. For things that both system miss, I think would be like a distributed workflow engine. I 100% believe that you know using like a tempora and throwing all of those three things in the workflow engine would be actually a pretty cool idea. Basically, having all of them in a separate thing and then have them be steps in the workflow. But overall, both designs were very solid. I think they're actually very close. And for the reasons of the clarity in the presentation, I lean a little bit more towards Brooklyn Nets. Specifically, I'm not very again, it's a very common kind of mistake that I called out quite a few times is by narrowing yourself down to a CRUD application. And also for the Raptors, you were done before the time is up, which is almost always a bad sign. And 100%, I would, if your system looks like CRUD, server, like if your system has server like an API gateway to a server directly to a database, you are 100% missed something. It's never like this in a real world. It should never be like this in a system design interview. Unless you're designing a URL shortener. But even for a simple question like a URL shortener, you can always make it more sophisticated by adding validation processes, caching layers, and stuff like that. So definitely would, CRUD is your enemy. Don't follow it. Don't, obviously, don't make complex systems look simple. Or I guess you can make them look simple, but don't avoid critical details. There is always more to it than that. So my vote goes for Brooklyn Nets.
I think I'm kind of a multi-region fan. I think your regional sharding was great. A great idea to bring that in. Harry kind of tipped that off at the start that we're going to be doing a global, this is a global system, and the regional sharding can help us both with scalability as well as in user experience, latency, and stuff like that. You mentioned in the design presentation that you would be routing to shard based on geolocation of the user's physical location at the CDN level. I think that's potentially going to get some misses, because really the shard that we need to be going to is where that hotel is homed. We don't care if the user's booking from a different country or something like that.
You're right.
Yeah, side note on that one, I'm kind of giving points off for this system because if you scroll down to where it says EU on it, You do get points for the globally distributed scale for it, but I'm gonna dock points purely just because there's a lot of major tax compliance rules that you do have to follow with that, and nothing in your design indicated how you would comply with any of those tax codes. Moral of the story for this one is don't open that can of worms unless you know fully end to end while you're opening it.
Yeah, so the routing really if you're gonna shard by geo, we'll need a global table that stores hotel ID to home region, and you can use that to then make the request to the correct spot. How the stateless services are in Kubernetes and databases on the outside. And in the presentation, you did realize that the hotel database is read heavy and SQL might be better. The data model on this is pretty thin, and besides the list of columns, it doesn't really show how the different parts interact as much. The lock release, the Redis is pretty standard for like something like this, but I think your presentation a little bit missed the point. I think Brooklyn Nets showed why you use Redis of I want to hold this, for 10 minutes during a checkout and then let him complete. But it seemed like when you were talking about it, it's a write to Redis, write to database, move lock from Redis. At that point, to me, it's just adding complexity, and you might as well use the locking built in the database. You talked about a global database on for bookings. I think that's probably a no-go for latency reasons. You mentioned sharding on room ID or user ID. The hotel ID would be a lot better because then all your data for the one hotel is in the same spot. I think this is back on Raptors still. User ID, if two users are competing for the same room, they're on different partitions, so you can't really have consistency guarantees there.
Oh, that's a good
I
point.
think that closes out Raptors. Let's head over to Brooklyn Nets. I liked the amount of detail, like even your bullet points down at the bottom there, and presentation seemed well thought through. The Kafka queue, I was leaning more for synchronous design here, because one, the user wants to know did they get it or not. If we're doing async, we're going to need another read path to be able to let the user know in the web app whether it succeeded versus them having to wait for an email. The you called out nicely about the hotel and room type being read heavy and relational. The hotel service, I think, was great that you made that you hit both the hotel's database and Postgres as well as Elasticsearch, versus just like blindly putting two services, one in front of each database. Because the data is useful in aggregate together, it can pull information from both and return it to the user. That also allows your Redis cache to cache that merged data, be a nice entity-based API. Let me see, there was one more thing. The presentation, you mentioned that 10-minute checkout allowance, where it seemed like a one-shot booking, but then you clarified later that the completion is the callback from PayPal. And I think that really closes the loop pretty well there on that one. I still think, it would be simpler without Kafka, but I could see how it works there. One comments for both people. The table, the availability being at the room, I think is probably not the best. To me, you would want your bookings database to be your availability, because then you've got that atomic flip from available not booked to booked not available. I think I'm going to go for Rachel. I think the core of this problem is the data, and conflict avoidance and the data model and stuff. And I felt like she went deeper on the data.
Awesome. All right, Mr. OpenAI, would you like to add your vote as well?
Yeah, I'm going Raptors.
That was brief. Any other comments? Why?
Yeah, so I mean, I thought that it perfectly hit the scope without over like it's not insisting upon itself. Was it like it perfectly hit upon exactly the needs for the users and exactly within scope of it, and I don't really see any major bottlenecks. Like on this own, this can stand up and be a perfectly functional system, especially for that level too. Like I feel like it's a level that's absolutely perfect and needed.
Okay. Now, question for all judges and chat. Do you guys would you pass them on the interview or reject?
Yeah, I think past
Um,
different.
I'd pass both. Toronto though, it would literally just be on the panic moment. If he can handle my grilling questions, passed. If not, I'm sorry.
For what level? For what level? Yeah, let's be like
Mid,
mid, both mid.
mid was
yeah.
what I was thinking.
Okay. So the prize for winning is a free session at Easy Climb Tech. So if you guys are preparing and you guys would like to get a mentor in tech, check out Easy Climb Tech, the website that I made along with Steph. Created this to help you guys prepare. So thanks for hanging out with us. And I have to drop. I have another meeting. And overall peace. And thank you.